Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we step quietly into a narrow street where the lamps are still glowing and the sky has not yet decided to turn blue. The air feels damp and cold against your face, and the buildings rise like dark walls on either side, guiding you towards something large, something humming even before the day begins. You can already hear it, faint but steady like a distant heartbeat made of iron. And just to be honest with you probably would not survive this for long, not without feeling every ounce of its weight pressing in. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, and you keep walking. Your shoes tap softly against uneven stone as you follow others moving in the same direction. No one speaks much. There is a shared understanding in the silence, a quiet agreement that words can wait. Breath curls into the air in faint clouds. Hands stay tucked into sleeves or pockets, guarding what little warmth remains from the night. Ahead of you, the factory comes into view. It does not feel welcoming. It does not try to. Tall brick walls stretch outward, broken only by narrow windows that glow faintly from within. A chimney towers above everything else, already releasing a thin ribbon of smoke into the pale darkness. The building seems awake long before anyone would choose to be. A widely recognized historical reality is that by the 1880s, many factories operated on long shifts that could begin before sunrise, especially in industries like textiles, steel, and manufacturing. The day was not shaped around comfort or natural rhythm, but around production targets and the steady turning of machines. Time belonged to the factory first, and to you only after. You slow your pace slightly as you approach the gates. There is a small crowd gathered already. Men, women, even children stand in loose clusters, shifting their weight from foot to foot. Some look half asleep, others already alert, their eyes fixed on the entrance as if it might close at any moment. A few exchange brief nods, quiet acknowledgements of familiar faces. You notice how young some of them are. A boy stands nearby, no more than 12 or 13, his coat too thin for the weather. He rubs his hands together, not just from the cold, but from habit, as if preparing them for what is coming. A girl beside him adjusts a scarf, her expression calm but distant, like someone who has done this many times before. It is easy to forget from a modern distance how common child labour still was in this period. In many industrial settings, children were employed because they could move quickly through tight spaces, tend machines, and accept lower wages. Their presence here is not unusual. It is expected. A faint metallic clang echoes from somewhere inside the building. You feel it before you fully hear it, a vibration that travels through the ground and into your shoes. The machines are already running. They do not wait for you. They never do. There is a small wooden board near the gate posted with notices. You step closer more out of curiosity than intention. The writing is cramped and formal, listing rules, fines and expectations. Late arrival, damaged materials, talking during work hours. Each offence has a cost attached to it. It feels less like guidance and more like a quiet warning. A lesser-known detail that sometimes surprises people is how precise these rules could be. In some factories, even a few minutes of lateness could result in wage deductions. In others, workers could be fined for things as small as leaving their station without permission or failing to maintain a certain pace. It was a system designed not just to organize labor, but to control it. You step back as the crowd shifts. Someone coughs nearby, a dry, persistent sound. Another person yawns without covering their mouth. There is a heaviness in the air, not just from the cold, but from anticipation. The kind that settles in your chest and stays there. You glance up at the sky. It is changing now just slightly. The darkness is thinning, not disappearing, but loosening its grip. Faint grey spreads across the horizon, hinting at the day that is coming, whether you are ready or not. Historians still argue whether workers in this era fully adapted to these early hours, or if the strain of unnatural schedules quietly eroded their health over time. Some suggest that people simply adjusted building routines around necessity. Others point to fatigue, illness, and long-term wear as evidence that the human body never truly made peace with this kind of rhythm. The gate creaks. It's not a dramatic sound, just a slow, deliberate movement of metal against metal. But it changes everything. Conversations stop, bodies straighten, the loose formation tightens into something more purposeful. You move forward with the others. There is no rush, not exactly, but there is urgency. A shared understanding that being late even by a small margin can have consequences. You feel it in the way people quicken their steps, in the way they avoid hesitation. As you pass through the gate, the world shifts. The air feels different inside, warmer but not in a comforting way. It carries a faint scent of oil and smoke, something thick and unfamiliar. The ground beneath your feet changes from uneven stone to worn industrial flooring, smoother but somehow harder. The sound grows louder. What was once a distant hum becomes a layered noise, complex and constant. You can hear individual elements now, the clatter of metal parts, the rhythmic pounding of engines, the sharp hiss of steam escaping somewhere out of sight. It blends together into something overwhelming, something that does not pause or soften. You hesitate for just a moment. Not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for you to feel it. That small instinct telling you that this place is not like the outside world. That once you move fully inside, the day will unfold in a way that is no longer entirely yours to shape. Then you step forward. The interior stretches out before you, larger than it seemed from the outside. Rows of machinery extend into the distance, their forms partially obscured by shadow and motion. Workers are already at their stations, moving with practiced efficiency. There is no dramatic beginning here. The work is already in progress. You find your place among them. There is no ceremony, no welcome. Just a quiet absorption into the rhythm of the space. You adjust your stance, your hands, your attention. You listen, trying to understand the patterns around you. When to move, when to pause, when to react. A foreman passes by, his eyes scanning the room. He does not stop, but you feel the weight of his attention as it moves across you. It is brief, almost casual, but it carries meaning. You're being observed. Not constantly, perhaps, but enough to matter. The machines continue their relentless motion, and you begin to realize that this is not just a place where work happens. It is a place that defines the shape of the day, the pace of your body, even the rhythm of your thoughts. Outside time moved with the sun. Here it moves with gears and belts, and the steady turning of something far larger than any one person. You take a slow breath. The air feels heavier, now touched with warmth and the faintest trace of dust. It settles in your lungs, not unpleasant yet, but noticeable. A reminder that even something as simple as breathing is different here. Around you, no one seems surprised. They move as if this is normal, as if this has always been the way things are, and perhaps for many of them it has. You glance once more toward the entrance. It is still there, visible but distant now, framed by shadow and movement. The outside world feels farther away than it should, as if the simple act of stepping inside has placed a quiet barrier between you and everything beyond these walls. The day has begun, and there is no gentle easing into it, only the steady, unyielding continuation of motion, sound, and expectation that will carry you forward minute by minute until the factory decides it is time to let you go. You settle into your position almost without noticing how it happens, as if the space itself guides you into place. The floor beneath you hums faintly with the movement of machinery, and the air carries that same layered noise you felt when you first stepped inside. It does not fade. It does not soften. It simply becomes something you must learn to exist within. Somewhere above the noise, a sharp bell rings. It cuts through everything with surprising clarity, a clean metallic note that seems to land directly in your chest. Around you there is a subtle shift. Hands move faster, backs straighten. A few late arrivals slip hurriedly into position, their movements quick and careful, hoping not to draw attention. Time has been announced. A well-established historical reality is that factory life in the late 19th century revolved around strict time discipline, often enforced by bells, whistles, or clocks that mark the beginning and end of shifts with absolute authority. Before industrialization, many people followed natural daylight cycles or task-based rhythms. Here, time is no longer something you feel, it is something imposed. You glance toward a large clock mounted high on the wall. Its face is easy to read even from a distance, but there is nothing comforting about it. The hands move steadily, indifferent to how you feel. Each minute is accounted for, measured, and silently judged. You become aware of your own movements. They are slightly hesitant at first, just a fraction too slow compared to those around you. You notice how others seem to anticipate the rhythm of their tasks. Their hands move with practiced precision, adjusting, aligning, repeating. There is no wasted motion, no pause for thought. You try to match them. At first, it feels unnatural. Your hands do not quite know where to go, your timing slightly off, but the pattern begins to reveal itself. A sequence of actions repeated again and again until it settles into your body like a quiet instruction. Beside you, a man works without looking up. His eyes remain fixed on his task, his fingers moving quickly, almost automatically. There is something almost hypnotic about it. You wonder how long he's been doing this. Weeks, months, years. He clears his throat softly, then speaks without turning his head. "Keep pace," he says, his voice low enough to blend with the noise. "Clock won't wait for you." It is not unkind, just practical. You nod even though he cannot see it and adjust your speed. A lesser known decor from this period is how closely time and wages were linked. In many factories, workers were paid based on hours worked or output produced within specific timeframes. Even small interruptions could reduce earnings. The result was a constant awareness of the clock, not just as a measure of the day, but as a measure of survival. Necessary. Bell sounds. This one is shorter, sharper, a signal for something subtle, a change in pace perhaps, or a reminder that the day is moving forward whether you're ready or not. You begin to notice the structure of it. The day is not one long stretch of labour. It is divided, segmented into pieces that feel both brief and endless, each marked by sound, each carrying its own expectations. You adjust your stance again. Your feet are already beginning to feel the firmness of the floor. Not pain, not yet, but a growing awareness. A quiet pressure that builds slowly, almost politely. You shift your weight. So does everyone else in small, nearly invisible ways. A collective adjustment that speaks of experience. No one stands completely still for long. They cannot. Across the room, a young girl glances up at the clock. It is a quick look, barely a second, but it carries meaning. You recognize it instantly. The silent question of how much time has passed, how much remains. It is a question that will follow you throughout the day. Historians continue to debate whether this strict time discipline fundamentally changed how people experienced life itself. Some argue that it introduced a new sense of efficiency and order. Others suggest it created a kind of internal pressure, a constant counting of moments that never truly disappears, even outside the factory walls. You feel a hint of that pressure now. Not overwhelming, not yet, but present. A man farther down the row suddenly stops, just for a second. His hand slips, his movement interrupted by something small and almost invisible. A thread catches. A piece shifts out of place. The pause is brief, but it draws attention. The foreman appears almost immediately. You did not see him approach, but suddenly he is there, standing close, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. A few quiet words are exchanged. You cannot hear them clearly, but the tone is enough, firm, controlled, final. The man nods quickly and resumes his work. His movements now slightly faster, slightly tighter. The moment passes, but it leaves something behind. A reminder. Time is not just measured here, it is enforced. You return your focus to your own task. The repetition begins to settle in more fully now. Your hands move with less hesitation. Your timing improves. The sequence becomes familiar, almost predictable. There is a strange comfort in that. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of stability. A sense that you are beginning to understand the rules of this place, even if you did not choose them. Another worker leans slightly toward you. First day she asks, her voice barely audible. You hesitate, then nod. She gives a small knowing sigh. "You'll get used to the bells," she says. "They get into your head after a while." She straightens again, returning to her work. You consider her words. Get used to it. It sounds simple, almost reassuring, but you are not entirely sure what it means to truly get used to something like this. To have your day broken into measured pieces, each one announced, monitored and controlled. A quirky but real observation from factory life is that some workers reportedly continue to hear phantom bells even after leaving work, especially during their early days. The sound became so ingrained in their routine that it lingered echoing faintly in their minds long after the actual noise had stopped. You imagine that now, walking home hearing a bell that is not there, turning your head instinctively expecting something to change. The idea lingers with you. Time continues to move. The clock hands shift almost imperceptibly yet undeniably. Minutes pass, then more. You stop trying to count them. It feels pointless. The clock will do that for you. Instead, you focus on the rhythm, the steady sequence of movement, the sound of machinery, the occasional bell, the quiet presence of others working alongside you. It becomes its own kind of world, one where the outside fades, slightly replaced by something more immediate, more structured. You're not alone in it, but you're also not entirely free within it. You glance up once more at the clock, just for a moment, and then you return to your task, because here every second has a place, and the day is only just beginning. You begin to notice the air more clearly now. At first, it was just there, something you breathed without thinking. But as the minutes pass, it starts to reveal itself in layers. There is warmth, uneven and shifting, rising from the machines. There is a faint dryness that settles along your throat. And beneath it all, there is a mixture of smells that does not quite belong to anything natural. Oil, metal, damp cloth, a trace of smoke. You inhale slowly, testing it. It is not immediately unbearable, but it is not clean either. It feels used somehow, as if it has already passed through too many places before reaching you. A broadly accepted historical observation is that factory environments in the 1880s often lacked proper ventilation, especially in textile mills and enclosed workshops. Air filled with lint dust and chemical residues was a daily reality, and workers spent long hours breathing it without protection. The long-term effects were rarely addressed at the time, even when they were quietly understood. You shift your shoulders slightly. The warmth becomes more noticeable as you move deeper into your rhythm. It is not the comforting warmth of sunlight or a fire at home. It is closer, more confined. It presses gently against your skin, building gradually. Some machines give off heat in steady waves. You can feel it when you pass too close, a brief surge that brushes against your arm or face. It fades quickly, but it leaves an impression. A reminder that these machines are not just objects. They are active, alive in their own mechanical way. The sound continues without pause. Now that you have been here for a while, you start to pick apart its layers. There is a deep, steady rumble beneath everything, like a foundation that never shifts. Above that, sharper noises rise and fall, clicking, clanking, a rapid tapping that repeats again and again. You begin to recognize patterns. One machine produces a rhythmic clatter that repeats every few seconds. Another releases a soft hiss at irregular intervals. Somewhere farther away, something heavy strikes with a dull, echoing thud. It all blends together, and yet somehow it also separates. A lesser-known detail from accounts of factory workers is how quickly people learn to identify problems through sound alone. A slight change in rhythm, a missed beat, or an unfamiliar vibration could signal trouble before it was visible. Hearing became not just a sense, but a tool for survival. You test that idea without fully meaning to. You listen more carefully. At first, everything still feels overwhelming. But then small distinctions begin to emerge. You notice when your own machine sounds slightly different, when its motion shifts just a fraction. You adjust your actions without thinking, responding to the change. It feels subtle, but it matters. Beside you, the same man from earlier continues his work with steady precision. His movements are almost synchronized with the machine, as if the two are working together rather than separately. You wonder if that is what it means to adapt. Not just to endure the environment, but to move within it so smoothly that the boundaries begin to blur. A sudden gust of warmer air passes through the space. It is brief but noticeable. Perhaps a door has opened somewhere. Perhaps a vent has shifted. For a moment, the scent of smoke becomes stronger, then fades again into the usual mixture. You swallow. Your throat feels slightly dry now. Not uncomfortable, just different. A small change that you file away without fully acknowledging. Across the room, a worker lifts a piece of fabric or material, shaking it lightly before setting it back into place. A faint cloud rises. You see it in the light, tiny particles catching the glow from a nearby window. They float for a moment, suspended, then disappear into the general haze of the room. You realize that this is always happening. Not just here, not just now. Everywhere in this space, small particles are moving through the air, invisible most of the time, but present all the same. Historians still argue whether workers at the time fully understood the health risks of these conditions or simply accepted them as unavoidable. Some records suggest a growing awareness, especially among reformers. Others indicate that necessity often outweighed concern, leaving little room for choice. You return your attention to your hands. They are moving more confidently now. The hesitation from earlier has mostly faded. You know where to place them, when to move, how to adjust. The rhythm is becoming familiar. There is a strange sensation that comes with that. Part of you feels more at ease. Another part feels something else. A quiet awareness that you are being shaped by this place, even in small ways. The noise no longer feels as sharp as it did when you first entered. It has not become quieter. That is not what has changed. Instead, your mind has begun to filter it, to soften its edges just enough for you to focus. It is not silence, but it is something close to manageable. A worker a few stations down coughs again. The same dry, persistent sound you heard earlier. It repeats, then fades, then returns. No one reacts. No one pauses. It is simply part of the background, as common as the hum of the machines. You glance in that direction briefly. The worker does not look up. He continues his task, his movements steady despite the interruption. It is as if the cough exists separately from everything else, unable to slow the pace of the work. You look back to your own station. A small adjustment is needed. You make it quickly, almost automatically now. The process is becoming smoother, your timing more precise. Minutes pass. You do not count them. Instead, you notice the way your body begins to settle into the space. Your shoulders relax slightly, though they remain alert. Your breathing finds a steady pattern matching the rhythm around you. Even the warmth begins to feel less intrusive. Not because it has lessened, but because you have begun to accept it. A quirky observation noted in some personal accounts is that workers often described the factory environment as something that stayed with them even after they left. Not just in their clothes or on their skin, but in their senses. The smell of oil, the feel of dust, the echo of machinery. These impressions lingered long after the workday ended. You can imagine that now, carrying this air with you even when you step outside. Feeling it in your hair, on your hands, in the back of your throat. It becomes part of you. The machines continue their endless motion. They do not tire. They do not hesitate. They simply continue, driven by forces that do not depend on comfort or preference. And you move with them. Not as a machine, not entirely, but close enough that the difference begins to feel smaller than it did before. You glance once more across the room. The windows are brighter now. Morning has arrived fully, though, but it feels distant, filtered through layers of glass and dust. The outside world exists, but it does not reach you in the same way. Here the environment is controlled, defined. You take another breath. The air is the same as before, thick, warm, filled with traces of work. And you realize something quietly. This is not just where you are. It is what you are, breathing, hearing, touching, becoming accustomed to minute by minute. The factory is not outside you. It is beginning slowly to settle within you. You begin to notice them not all at once, but in fragments. A small movement near the base of a machine. A quick step where the space narrows. A pair of hands that seem too small for the work they are doing. At first, your attention passes over it, absorbed in your own rhythm. But then it returns more clearly this time. Children. They are everywhere once you truly see them. Not in groups, not gathered together, but woven into the fabric of the workshop itself. Moving between machines, slipping through tight gaps, tending parts of the process that require smaller bodies and quicker steps. A commonly acknowledged reality of industrial labour in the late 19th century is that child workers formed a significant portion of the workforce in many factories, particularly in textile industries. Their size made them useful for tasks like clearing debris from beneath machines, or reaching into narrow spaces where adults could not easily fit. You watch a boy pass by your station. He moves quickly, almost lightly, as if he has learned to travel without drawing attention. His eyes stay focused on the ground ahead, scanning for anything that might slow him down. There is no hesitation in his movements, only familiarity. He disappears behind a row of machinery. For a moment you lose sight of him entirely. Then you notice him again, crouched low, reaching into a space that seems far too tight for comfort. His arm extends his fingers, working carefully, retrieving something small and unseen. He pulls back just as quickly, rising in one smooth motion before continuing on. It happens so fast that it almost feels practice beyond thought. You feel a quiet tension settle in your chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Nearby, a girl stands on a small wooden platform to reach her station. The height is just enough to bring her hands level with the moving parts in front of her. She adjusts something with steady precision, her face calm, her posture balanced. There is no sign of uncertainty. A lesser known detail from personal accounts is that many child workers develop remarkable skill and awareness at a young age, not out of choice but out of necessity. The environment demanded it, and over time they adapted in ways that blurred the line between childhood and labour. You find yourself watching their movements more closely now. There is a pattern to it, a rhythm that mirrors the machines but carries its own subtle differences, quicker reactions, shorter steps, a kind of efficiency that comes from constant repetition. And yet there are moments that remind you of something else. The boy you saw earlier pauses briefly near a pile of materials. For just a second he shifts his weight in a way that feels almost playful, a small unconscious movement. It is gone as quickly as it appears, replaced again by focus. It lingers with you, a question without a clear answer. Across the room a foreman walks past, his gaze sweeping the floor. When it lands on the children it does not linger. Not because they are unimportant, but because they are part of the system as expected as the machines themselves. This normalization feels heavier than anything spoken aloud. You adjust your own hands, returning to your task. But your awareness remains divided now. Part of you focused on the work, another part quietly observing. There is a story here that is not immediately visible. Some historians suggest that families often relied on the additional income provided by their children's labour, especially in urban industrial areas where living costs were rising. Others point out that the line between necessity and exploitation was often thin-shaped by circumstances that left few alternatives. You consider that as you watch a group of younger workers move through a narrow aisle. They do not speak, but there is a shared understanding in the way they navigate around each other. A quick glance, a slight shift, enough to avoid collision, enough to maintain pace. It feels like its own language. You notice their clothing. It's practical, worn, often slightly oversized or layered for warmth. Nothing decorative, nothing unnecessary. Each piece chosen for function rather than appearance. A faint trace of lint clings to the fabric, catching the light as they move. The environment marks them just as it marks everything else. You feel the air again, the warmth, the dust, and you realize that they have likely been breathing this longer than you. Day after day, week after week, becoming accustomed to it in ways that are difficult to imagine from the outside. There is a quiet resilience in that, but also something more complicit. A reflective point often raised by researchers is whether these early working experiences shaped children's long-term physical and mental development in ways that were not fully understood at the time. The evidence is uneven, drawn from scattered records and personal accounts, leaving space for interpretation. You return your gaze to your own station. The rhythm continues. The machines do not slow, and neither do the workers. Everything moves forward with steady persistence, as if the entire space is guided by an invisible current. The boy passes by again. This time he glances up for just a moment. Your eyes meet. It is brief, almost accidental, but it carries something. Not a smile, not quite curiosity, just recognition. The simple acknowledgement that you are both here, part of the same moving system. Then he looks away, continuing on without pause. The moment fades, but it leaves an impression. You adjust your stance again, feeling the firmness of the floor, the steady vibration beneath your feet. Your hands continue their work, more fluid, now more certain. The day stretches ahead, and within it these small figures move with quiet determination in their presence, both ordinary and striking at the same time. You do not fully understand it yet, but you feel it. A subtle shift in how you see the space around you. The factory is not just machines and noise and structure. It is people, all of them, moving together, adapting, enduring, shaping, and being shaped in return. And among them, the youngest carry their part of the weight step by step, without ceremony, without pause. As if this has always been the way of things. You begin to notice another rhythm layered into the space, quieter than the machines, but just as steady. Rows, long uninterrupted lines of workstations stretch across the floor, each one occupied, each one repeating a narrow set of motions again and again. When you look more closely, you see that many of these stations are tended by women. They stand or sit with a kind of practiced stillness, their movements precise and contained. Hands move quickly, adjusting threads, guiding materials, aligning pieces that pass through the machine's grip. Their attention rarely drifts. When it does, it returns just as quickly. A well-documented feature of industrial life in the 1880s is that women made up a large portion of the workforce in sectors like textiles, garment production, and light manufacturing. Employers often preferred hiring women for these roles because they were perceived as more suited to repetitive tasks and could be paid lower wages than men. You watch one woman near the end of a row. Her posture is upright but not rigid. There is a slight curve in her shoulders that suggests long familiarity with this position. Her fingers move with remarkable speed, catching small errors before they become problems, smoothing irregularities without hesitation. She does not look rushed, but she is not slow either. It is something in between, a steady pace that seems to match the expectations of the room exactly. You try to listen past the machines. There are voices here, but they are soft, nearly hidden beneath the noise. A brief exchange of words between stations, a quick remark followed by a small nod. Nothing that lingers long enough to disrupt the flow. Conversation exists, but only in fragments. A lesser-known aspect of factory life is how communication adapted to these conditions. Workers often developed short, efficient ways of speaking using gestures or brief phrases that could be understood without needing to rise above the constant noise. It was not silence, but it was something close to it. The woman glances up for a moment, not at you, but towards the line ahead. She checks the pace, the alignment of work moving toward her station. Then her focus returns to her hands as if guided by instinct more than conscious thought. You notice how little space there is between stations, just enough to move to adjust to exist without interfering with the next person. It creates a sense of closeness that feels both communal and confined. You are near others at all times, yet rarely engage with them beyond necessity. Another woman shifts her weight slightly. Her foot presses against the floor, then lifts, then settles again. A small movement repeated over time. It is almost unnoticeable, but you recognize it now as part of the body's quiet adjustments to standing or sitting for long hours. You find yourself doing something similar, a subtle shift, a redistribution of pressure. Your body learning without instruction how to endure. Some scholars have pointed out that women working in factories often carried a double burden, balancing long hours of industrial labor with responsibilities at home. Cooking, cleaning, caring for family members. The work did not end when the shift was over. It simply changed form. You imagine that transition, leaving this space carrying its noise and weight with you, only to step into another set of tasks waiting patiently at home. It adds a different layer to what you are seeing, a quiet endurance that extends beyond the walls of the factory. Across the row, a small mistake occurs. A thread tangles, slightly disrupting the smooth motion of the process. The woman at that station reacts instantly, her hands moving to correct it before it spreads. There is no frustration visible, no outward sign of irritation, just action. The correction is quick. The rhythm resumes. It is as if interruptions are expected but not allowed to linger. You notice the clothing again. Practical, durable, chosen for movement rather than appearance. Sleeves are often rolled or secured, preventing them from catching in the machinery. Hair is tied back or covered, kept safely out of reach. Everything has a purpose. Even the smallest detail is shaped by the demands of the environment. A curious detail mentioned in some personal recollections is that workers sometimes personalize small aspects of their attire in subtle ways, a ribbon, a pin, a particular way of tying a scarf. These details were often hidden or understated small expressions of identity within a highly controlled space. You look more closely here, see, and you begin to see them, a faint pattern on a piece of fabric, a carefully chosen colour, something that stands out just enough to matter to the person wearing it even if no one else notices. It feels important. A reminder that individuality does not disappear entirely even here. The machines continue their steady motion. The women move with them not as extensions of the machine, but as partners in a process that requires constant attention and care. There is skill in what they do, even if it is not always recognized as such. You adjust your own pace again. It feels more natural, now less forced. Your hands move with greater confidence, your timing more consistent. You are still aware of yourself, but less uncertain. Time passes. You feel it not in minutes, but in cycles. Repeated actions, completed sequences, the quiet accumulation of effort. A reflective question often raised in historical studies is whether the repetitive nature of factory work dulled the mind or allowed it to wander in new ways. Some accounts suggest a kind of mental drifting where thoughts move freely even as the body continues its task. Others describe a narrowing of focus where attention remains fixed on the work to avoid mistakes. You test that idea without meaning to. For a moment, your thoughts drift. Not far, not completely away from the present, but enough to notice. Then something shifts in the rhythm of your task and your attention snaps back, instantly correcting your movement before an error can form. It is a balance between awareness and habit, between presence and endurance. You glance down the row once more. The women continue their work, steady, focused, moving in quiet coordination with the machines and with each other. There is no single moment that defines it, no dramatic event, just continuity. And within that continuity, a kind of strength that is not loud or visible but deeply rooted in the repetition of daily life. You return your gaze forward, your hands continue their motion, the rhythm holds, and the day moves on, carried by countless small actions, each one essential. Each one part of something larger than any single person can fully see. You begin to notice the difference not in what is done, but in how it feels. The tasks around you shift slightly as your awareness expands across the workshop. Some movements are light and precise like the work you've been watching along the rows. Others carry a heavier presence, slower in motion but stronger in effort. You turn your head just enough to see it more clearly. At the far side of the floor where the machines grow larger and the noise deepens, men move among equipment that demands more force than finesse. Their actions are broader, their steps more grounded, as if the work itself presses downward through their bodies into the floor. A widely accepted observation of industrial labour in the late 19th century is that many factories divided tasks along perceived lines of strength and endurance. Men were often assigned to operate heavier machinery, handle raw materials, or maintain equipment, while women and children were more frequently placed in roles requiring precision and repetition. You watch one man guide a thick piece of material into a machine. His hands are steady, but the effort shows in the tension of his arms. He leans slightly into the motion, using his weight to control the process. When the machine engages, it responds with a deeper, more forceful sound. Something that resonates differently from the lighter rhythms closer to you. It feels slower, but it is not less demanding. Another man stands nearby, adjusting a mechanism with careful attention. His fingers move deliberately, tightening, checking, testing. There is a different kind of skill here. Less visible, perhaps, but just as important. You begin to understand that strength in this space is not only about lifting or pushing, it is also about control. About knowing how much pressure to apply, when to act, when to hold back. A detail sometimes overlooked is that many skilled male workers in factories took pride in their ability to manage complex machines, seeing their work as a craft, rather than simple labour. This sense of identity could shape how they viewed themselves and their place within the industrial system. You notice it in their posture. There is a quiet confidence in the way they move, a familiarity that suggests long experience. Even in the repetitive nature of the work, there are small variations that require attention and judgment. A man wipes his hands on a cloth at his side. The motion is quick, habitual. His hands return to the machine without pause. There is no break in the rhythm, only a brief adjustment before continuing. You realize that the work does not allow for separation between effort and recovery. They exist together. Your own body begins to register new sensations. Your arms feel slightly heavier now, not from strain but from repetition. Your shoulders carry a faint tension that was not there before. It is subtle, but it builds slowly, layer by layer. You shift again, redistributing the weight. So does nearly everyone around you. Some accounts suggest that the physical demands placed on workers varied widely depending on the role, but all shared a common element of endurance. Whether through sustained strength or continuous motion, the body was engaged without long periods of rest. You glance toward a group of men working together. They coordinate their movements without speaking, lifting, and positioning something larger than any one person could manage alone. There is a rhythm to it, a shared timing that allows them to act as a unit. It feels almost like choreography. Each person knows when to move, when to hold, when to release. The action completes smoothly. Then they separate, returning to their individual tasks as if nothing unusual has occurred. A quiet thought emerges. This is not just labour, it is cooperation shaped by necessity. A curious observation noted in some historical descriptions is that moments of teamwork in factories often created brief connections between workers even in environments where individuality was otherwise limited. These interactions were usually short, practical and unspoken, but they carried a sense of shared effort. You see that now, in the quick glance exchanged after a task is completed, in the slight nod that acknowledges success without interrupting the flow of work. It is subtle, but it matters. You return your attention to your own station. The rhythm continues steady and unbroken. Your movements are now more aligned with the pace around you. You feel less like an observer and more like a participant. The sound of the larger machines reaches you again. It rolls across the space, deeper and slower, adding another layer to the constant noise. You feel it in your chest as much as you hear it, a low vibration that anchors the environment. Historians continue to examine whether the rise of mechanized labor changed how workers understood their own value. Some suggest that as machines became more central, individual skill was overshadowed. Others argue that new forms of expertise emerged tied to the operation and maintenance of those machines. You consider that as you watch the men at work. Their actions are not random, they are precise, learned, refined over time. Even within a system that prioritizes output, there is room for knowledge, for experience, for a kind of mastery. Your hands move again, completing another cycle. You do not need to think about each step now. The sequence flows more naturally, guided by repetition. There is a quiet shift happening within you. Not dramatic, not immediate, but present. You are adapting. The environment that once felt overwhelming is becoming something you can navigate. Not comfortably, perhaps, but with an increasing familiarity. You notice a man pause for just a moment. He stretches his fingers slightly, a small release of tension before returning to his task. The movement is brief, almost hidden, but it reveals something important. Even here, even within this steady demand, the body seeks moments of relief. They are small, but they are necessary. You try the same, adjusting your grip, flexing your fingers before continuing. The difference is slight but noticeable. A small easing of pressure before the rhythm resumes. Time moves forward. The clock continues its steady count, though you look at it less often now. Your sense of the day is shifting, guided more by cycles of work than by measured minutes. You glance once more toward the heavier machinery. The men continue their tasks steady, focus their movements grounded in strength and control. They are part of the same system, yet their experience carries its own texture shaped by the demands placed on them. You return your gaze forward. Your hands move again. The rhythm holds, and within it you feel the quiet merging of effort and routine, of body and motion, as the day continues to unfold around you. The sound changes before you fully realize it, not because it becomes louder, but because your awareness sharpens just enough to notice how constant it truly is. What once felt like a wall of noise now begins to separate into layers that never quite stop moving. It surrounds you. It presses in from every direction, filling the air so completely that silence feels like something distant, almost imaginary. A widely recognized feature of industrial workplaces in the late 19th century is that noise levels were intense and continuous, especially in textile mills and heavy manufacturing. Machinery operated for hours without pause, creating an environment where workers had to adjust not only their bodies, but also their hearing and communication habits. You listen more carefully now. There is a sharp repeating clatter nearby, fast and insistent like a ticking that refuses to slow down. Beneath it, a deeper rumble rolls steadily through the floor, something slower but more powerful. Somewhere above, a high-pitched whir cuts through everything else, thin but persistent. None of it fades, none of it waits. You try for a moment to imagine what it would feel like if it all stopped at once. The thought feels strange, almost unsettling. A lesser-known detail drawn from worker recollections is that some people reported discomfort and complete somnol after long shifts, as if their senses had grown so accustomed to constant sound that its absence felt unnatural. The quiet could feel just as overwhelming as the noise itself. You understand that now, at least in part, your ears are adjusting, not by reducing the volume but by learning what to ignore. Certain sounds drift into the background, becoming less sharp, less demanding of attention. Others remain clear signals you instinctively recognize as important. You hear a slight irregularity in the rhythm of your own station. It is small, almost hidden, but it catches your attention immediately. Your hands respond without hesitation, correcting the motion before it becomes a problem. You pause for a fraction of a second. Not stopping your work, but noticing what just happened. You heard it before you saw it. That realization settles quietly into your mind. Some observers of industrial life have noted that workers often developed a kind of auditory awareness that allowed them to detect changes in machinery through sound alone. It became a form of listening that went beyond ordinary hearing, shaped by the necessity and repetition. You feel the beginning of that now. A subtle shift in how you engage with the space around you. Voices try to exist within the noise. You catch fragments of them here and there, words that rise just enough to be understood before dissolving again. They are short, efficient, often repeated in similar forms. Careful there. Keep it steady. Watch your hand. They do not carry far. They do not need to. You notice how people lean slightly toward one another when they speak, closing the distance just enough for their words to be heard. There is no shouting unless something goes wrong. Most communication happens in these small, controlled exchanges. A curious observation found in some accounts is that workers sometimes developed informal signals or gestures to communicate over the noise-subtle movements of the hand or head that carried meaning without sound. These systems were rarely written down, but they became part of daily life within the factory. You begin to recognize a few of them. A quick nod to signal readiness, a raised hand to pause, a brief glance that says more than a full sentence could. It feels like learning a quiet language. The sound continues without interruption. Minute after minute, it fills the space, shaping your awareness in ways that are difficult to describe. It's not just something you hear, it becomes something you exist within. You notice the effect it has on your thoughts. They move differently now. Shorter, more focused, less likely to wander far from the present moment. It is as if the noise creates a boundary, keeping your attention close to your immediate surroundings. There is a strange clarity in that. Not peaceful, not restful, but steady. Some historians have explored whether prolonged exposure to industrial noise altered workers' mental experiences, encouraging a kind of narrowed focus, or even a form of mental endurance. Others suggest that people simply adapted in practical ways, learning to function despite the conditions without deeper transformation. You cannot fully answer that, but you feel something shifting. The sound is no longer an obstacle you must overcome. It's becoming part of the structure that holds the day together. A sudden, sharper noise cuts through the usual rhythm. For a moment, everything seems to tighten. Heads turn slightly, hands adjust. The source of the sound is unclear, but the reaction is immediate. Then just as quickly, the usual pattern returns. The interruption fades, but it leaves a trace behind, a reminder that the system, while steady, is not entirely unbreakable. You return your attention to your task. Your movements continue, guided by the now familiar rhythm. Your breathing remains steady even as the air vibrates around you with constant motion. The sound settles again into its layered form. You feel it in your ears, in your chest, even faintly in your bones. It is not just external. It resonates through you, shaping how you stand, how you move, how you think. You glance briefly toward another worker. He does not look up, but his head tilts slightly as if listening to something specific within the noise. A moment later, he adjusts his machine, correcting a subtle issue before it grows. The pattern repeats, listening, adjusting, continuing. A reflective question sometimes raised by scholars is whether this constant engagement with sound created a deeper connection between workers and their machines, or if it simply reinforced the sense of being tied to them. The answer remains open, shaped by individual experience and perspective. You consider that as you continue your work. The boundary between you and the machine feels thinner now. Not gone, but less defined. Your hands move with its rhythm. Your attention follows its signals. Your awareness is shaped by its presence. The noise does not stop, but neither do you. And within that shared continuity, something settles into place. Not comfort, not quite acceptance, but a steady coexistence that carries you forward one moment into the next as the day continues to unfold within the unending sound of the factory floor. You begin to feel the air settle more deeply into you now. Not just in your lungs, but on your skin, in your clothes, along the edges of your senses. It has a presence that is difficult to ignore once you notice it fully. Something fine and constant, almost invisible, yet undeniably there. Dust. Not the kind that gathers quietly on a shelf, but something active, something that moves. A broadly recognized reality of factory environments in this period is that airborne particles were everywhere, especially in textile mills where fibers broke loose during processing. These tiny fragments filled the air, catching light in faint drifting patterns often unnoticed, until they settled onto surfaces or into the body itself. You see it now when the light shifts. A narrow beam filters through a high window, cutting across the room at an angle. Within it, small particles float and turn, rising and falling in slow, delicate motion. It would almost be beautiful if you did not know what it meant. You take a breath. The air feels thicker than it did earlier. Not heavy enough to stop you, but present enough to be felt. It brushes the back of your throat, leaving a faint dryness that lingers after each inhale. You swallow. It helps, but only still, and peacefully, slightly. Nearby, a worker wipes their face with the back of their hand, leaving a faint streak where the dust has gathered. The motion is quick, habitual, as if done many times before. You begin to notice how often this happens. A hand across the mouth, a sleeve brushing the cheek, small repeated efforts to clear away what cannot truly be avoided. A lesser-known detail found in some accounts is that workers sometimes use simple cloth coverings over their mouths or noses, not as formal protection, but as a personal attempt to reduce what they were breathing. These measures were inconsistent and often only partially effective. You imagine tying a piece of fabric across your face. Would it help? Perhaps a little, but the air would still find its way in. You return your focus to your task, your hands moving in their now familiar sequence. The rhythm holds steady and continuous, but your awareness of the environment has shifted again. It is not just sound, it is not just movement, it is what surrounds everything. A faint smell drifts through the space. It is subtle at first, almost easy to miss. Then it becomes clearer, oil warmed by friction. A hint of something burnt, not sharp enough to alarm, but present enough to notice. You breathe it in without choice, and it stays with you. Some historians note that factory workers often describe the smell of their workplace as something that followed them home, clinging to their clothing and hair. It became part of their daily experience, a scent that marked the boundary between work and the outside world. You can understand that now. It is not a single smell, but a mixture. One that changes slightly depending on where you stand, what machines are nearby, how the air moves. It becomes familiar quickly. Across the room, a machine releases a brief burst of steam. The sound is sharp, the cloud momentary. It rises, then fades, blending back into the general haze. The air shifts slightly, carrying a new layer of warmth with it. You feel it brush your face. Then it is gone. Your skin begins to register more than just temperature. There is a faint stickiness now, especially along your hands. A combination of heat dust and the natural response of your body to sustained effort. It is not uncomfortable yet, but it is noticeable. You rub your fingers together briefly. The sensation is different than it would be outside. Less clean, more textured. A curious observation recorded in some worker recollections is that people often became so accustomed to these conditions that they stopped noticing them during the day only becoming aware of them again after leaving the factory and encountering fresh air. You wonder if that will happen to you, if the moment you step outside will feel sharper, clearer, almost surprising. For now, this is your air. You take another breath. The dryness in your throat returns slightly stronger than before. You resist the urge to cough, focusing instead on maintaining your rhythm. Around you, others continue without pause. Some cough, occasionally short and controlled as if trained not to let it interrupt their work. Others show no outward reaction at all, their bodies accustomed to the environment in ways that are difficult to read. A reflective point raised by researchers is whether the long-term health effects of these conditions were fully recognized by workers at the time or gradually understood through experience. The evidence suggests a mix of both awareness and acceptance shaped by necessity. You consider that as you continue your task. Awareness does not always lead to change, especially when options are limited. The machines continue their motion. The air continues to move, carrying dust, heat, and scent in slow, constant currents. It is not still. It is never still. Even when you cannot see it, it is shifting, circulating, settling, rising again. You adjust your stance slightly, turning just enough to catch a different angle of the light. For a moment, the particles become visible again, suspended in that narrow beam. They drift lazily, unaffected by the urgency of everything else around them. It creates a strange contrast. Stillness within motion, calm within intensity. Then the moment passes. You turn back your focus, returning to your hands, your task, your place within the system. The air remains, unseen but felt. It touches everything. It becomes part of everything. And slowly, without asking permission, it becomes part of you as well. Not in a way you can easily define, but in a way you cannot ignore. You breathe in, you breathe out, and the factory breathes with you, filling the space with its quiet, persistent presence as the day continues to unfold. Your body begins to notice something before your mind names it. A quiet pull, a hollow space that opens slowly somewhere beneath the steady rhythm you've been following. It does not interrupt your work, but it lingers, growing just enough to be felt. Hunger. It arrives without ceremony. A well-established aspect of factory life in the 1880s is that meal breaks were often short, irregular, or strictly controlled depending on the workplace. In many settings, workers had limited time to eat, sometimes only a brief pause during long shifts that stretched across much of the day. You glance toward the clock, not because you expect relief, but because the thought has entered your awareness. The hands have moved, but not enough to bring anything resembling a true break. Around you, the rhythm continues unchanged. Yet small signs begin to appear. A worker reaches into a pocket during a brief lull in movement, pulling out a small piece of bread. The action is quick, almost hidden time carefully between motions. A bite is taken, then another, each one fitted into the spaces where attention can momentarily shift. The work does not stop. It bends just slightly to allow for survival. Survival. You consider doing the same. Your hands continue their task, but your awareness drifts toward the idea of food. Something simple, something quick. There is no thought of comfort or enjoyment, only function. You reach into your own pocket. Your fingers close around something small, bread perhaps, or a piece of something prepared earlier. You bring it up carefully, timing your movement with the rhythm you have learned. A bite. It is dry but not unpleasant. It fills the space just enough to quiet the hollow feeling. You chew quickly, swallowing without pause. Then your hands return fully to their work. A lesser-known detail from worker accounts is that many people develop ways to eat while continuing their tasks, especially when formal breaks were too short or poorly timed. Food became something that fit around the work rather than something the work paused for. You notice others doing the same. A woman along the row takes a small sip from a tin cup, lifting it just long enough to drink before setting it down again. A man farther away chews slowly, his movements never fully stopping. It creates a quiet rhythm of its own, work and nourishment woven together in small, efficient motions. The taste lingers briefly, simple, plain enough. There is no room here for elaborate meals or long pauses. The body takes what it needs in measured amounts, just enough to continue. A faint smell drifts through the space again. This time it is not from the machine, but from the food itself. Bread, perhaps something slightly sweet, maybe a hint of preserved meat. The scents are subtle, easily overwhelmed by the stronger presence of oil and dust, but they exist all the same. They remind you of something outside, a different kind of time, one that moves more slowly. Some historians have explored how industrial work changed eating habits, pushing people toward quicker, simpler meals that could be consumed with minimal interruption. The shift was not just in what people ate, but in how they experienced food itself. You feel that change now. Eating is no longer a separate moment. It is part of the process. A brief pause and attention, then a return. You take another small bite, then another. The hunger eases slightly. Not completely, but enough to fade into the background once more. It becomes something you carry rather than something that demands immediate attention. Across the room, a worker wipes their hands before reaching for food. The motion is careful, an attempt to separate the act of eating from the residue of the work. It is only partially successful. The environment does not allow for full separation. Still, the effort is made. A curious detail mentioned in some recollections is that workers often became accustomed to eating in less than ideal conditions, sometimes barely noticing the surroundings after a while. What might seem uncomfortable from the outside became routine through repetition. You begin to understand that. The dust, the noise, the constant motion. They do not disappear, but they lose their sharpness as your attention shifts. You swallow again. The dryness in your throat returns briefly, then settles. A sip of water would help you think. You glance around. There is a container nearby shared among a few workers. One of them steps forward, takes a quick drink, then moves back without breaking the flow of work. You wait for a moment when the timing feels right. Then you step forward. The water is cool, simple grounding. You take a small sip, then another, careful not to linger too long. The taste is plain, but it carries a quiet relief. You return to your station. The rhythm resumes fully. Your body feels slightly steadier now the earlier pull of hunger softened. Not gone, but manageable. Time continues. You notice it less through the clock and more through these small cycles. Work a bite, a sip, then work again. Each one marking the passage of the day in a way that feels more immediate than the movement of hands on a dial. A reflective question raised by some researchers is whether the blending of work and basic needs in factory life changed how people understood rest and nourishment. Did these moments lose their sense of pause, becoming simply another part of the labour itself? You consider that as you continue. The answer feels close but not fully formed. You take one last small bite, then your pocket is empty. The act is complete. There is no lingering, no extended pause to reflect on the meal. It has served its purpose, nothing more. Around you, others follow the same pattern. Small movements, quick consumption, immediate return. The machines continue their steady motion. The sound remains constant. The air carries its familiar weight. And within it all, you move forward, sustained by brief moments of nourishment that fit quietly into the larger rhythm of the day. The hunger does not disappear entirely, but it no longer leads. The work does. And so you continue step by step, motion by motion, as the day carries on without slowing, without waiting, without offering more than these small necessary pauses along the way. You begin to feel it before you clearly see it. A shift in the air that has nothing to do with heat or dust. A tightening almost invisible that moves through the space without sound. It passes from one worker to another, subtle but unmistakable. Authority. Not loud, not announced, just present. And as this established feature of factory life in the late 19th century, is the role of foremen and supervisors who enforced discipline, monitored output, and ensured that rules were followed with consistency. Their presence was not constant in every moment, but it was felt at all times. You notice him again. The foreman moves along the aisle with a steady pace, his steps measured, his gaze alert. He does not rush. He does not need to. The environment itself adjusts around him. Workers straighten slightly as he approaches. Hands become a fraction more precise. Movements tighten errors corrected before they can be noticed. No one speaks unless necessary, and even then only briefly. It's not fear in the dramatic sense. It is something quieter. Awareness. You keep your eyes on your task, but your attention follows him as he passes behind you. You feel the weight of observation, even if it lasts only a second. Then it is gone. He continues on. You release a breath you did not realize you were holding. A lesser-known aspect of factory discipline is the system of fines that could be imposed for small infractions. Workers might lose portions of their wages for lateness, damaged materials, or even talking during work hours. These deductions were often recorded carefully, reinforcing a sense of constant accountability. You remember the board near the entrance, the list of rules. Now you understand how they live within the space, not just on paper. A woman a few stations away hesitates for just a moment. Her hand pauses, her timing slightly off. It is brief, barely noticeable, but the foreman stops. He turns. There is no raised voice, only a few words spoken low, direct, leaving no room for confusion. You cannot hear them clearly, but the meaning carries through posture and tone. She nods quickly. Her hands resume their motion faster now, more controlled. The foreman watches for a second longer. Then he moves on. The moment dissolves, but its effect lingers. A small tightening across the row. You feel it in your own hands, your own movements becoming just a bit more careful. Some observers of industrial workplaces have suggested that this constant oversight shaped not only behavior but also internal discipline. Workers learned to monitor themselves, adjusting before correction was needed. You recognize that happening now. You check your own rhythm, your timing, your posture, not because you have been told to, but because the expectation exists, quiet and persistent. Across the room, a chalkboard catches your eye. Numbers are written across it, rough and uneven, likely updated throughout the day. You cannot see them clearly from here, but you understand their purpose. Tracking, measuring, comparing. A curious detail found in some factory records is that output was sometimes displayed publicly, creating a subtle form of competition or pressure among workers. Whether intentional or not, it reinforced the idea that performance was always visible, always judged. You turn your attention back to your task. The rhythm continues. Your hands move with growing confidence, but now there is an added layer of awareness, a sense that each motion carries weight beyond itself. A man nearby adjusts his position slightly. He glances toward the foreman's path, then back to his work. The movement is quick, almost instinctive, as if checking the boundaries of attention. It becomes clear that everyone is aware, even when they do not show it. A reflective question raised by some historians is whether this form of oversight created efficiency at the cost of autonomy, or if workers found ways to maintain a sense of control within the system. The answer remains complex, shaped by individual experience and circumstance. You consider that as you continue. There is structure here, order, but also constraint. Your body moves within it, adapting, responding, adjusting without conscious thought. A sudden sound breaks slightly from the usual pattern. Not loud, but different enough to catch attention. A tool slips, striking against a surface with a sharper note than expected. Heads turn just briefly. The foreman looks up. The worker responsible corrects the situation quickly, returning the tool to its proper place. The interruption is short, contained. The foreman watches for a moment, then nods once, almost imperceptibly, and continues on. The system absorbs the disruption. It does not pause. You feel your own focus sharpen again. The rhythm resumes fully, but the awareness remains. A quiet understanding that every action exists within a framework of expectation. A small gesture catches your eye. A worker taps the edge of their station lightly, a quick, almost unconscious movement. It could be a habit, or perhaps a signal, or simply a way to release a bit of tension. It is gone as quickly as it appears. These small actions seem to exist beneath the surface of the rules, not breaking them, but not entirely defined by them either. You continue your work. The machines move. The air remains thick with sound and dust. And within it all, the presence of authority weaves quietly through the space-shaping behavior without needing to announce itself. You adjust your stance. Stance or Your hands move with steady precision. The foreman passes once more his path, predictable now, yet never fully ignored. You feel the rhythm of observation as clearly as the rhythm of the machines. Both constant, both shaping the day. And as time moves forward, you begin to understand that here control is not always loud. Sometimes it's simply there, unspoken, unavoidable, guiding every motion, every pause, every decision, as the work continues without interruption. You become aware of it slowly, not through a single moment, but through small signals that gather over time. A hand pulled back just a little too quickly. A glance exchanged between workers, brief and meaningful. A shift in posture when something sounds slightly different than it should. Risk. It does not announce itself loudly. It lingers at the edges of every motion present, even when nothing goes wrong. A firmly established reality of industrial work in the late 19th century is that factory environments carried a constant risk of injury, often due to exposed machinery, fast-moving parts, and long hours that increased fatigue. Safety measures existed in some places, but they were inconsistent and often minimal by modern standards. You notice a narrow gap between two moving parts. It's small, easy to overlook, but it draws your attention now. The motion is steady, repetitive, almost inviting in its predictability, and yet you understand instantly that it requires care. A worker nearby reaches close to that space. His hand moves with confidence, guided by experience. He adjusts something quickly, precisely, then withdraws without hesitation. The motion is smooth, but it carries weight. You realize how easily it could go wrong. You return your focus to your own station, your hands moving in their familiar sequence. The rhythm continues, but now there is an added awareness beneath it. A quiet calculation that runs alongside each action. Where to place your fingers, how close to move, when to pause, even for a fraction of a second. A lesser-known detail drawn from historical accounts is that many workers developed an almost instinctive understanding of danger zones within their workspace. These were not always marked or explained, but learned through observation and experience, sometimes passed quietly from one worker to another. You feel that learning beginning now, not through instruction, but through attention. Across the room, a sudden movement catches your eye. A piece of material slips unexpectedly, shifting out of alignment. The worker handling it reacts immediately, pulling back and correcting the position before it can cause further disruption. The moment is brief, but it leaves a trace. A reminder that even small changes can carry consequences. You notice how quickly everything returns to normal. There is no extended pause, no gathering of attention. The system continues absorbing the disruption as if it were part of the design. A curious observation found in some worker recollections is that minor incidents were often treated as routine, acknowledged briefly, and then set aside. The pace of work did not allow for long interruptions, and so attention moved forward quickly. You begin to understand that rhythm, the balance between awareness and continuation, between caution and necessity. A worker farther down the line flexes his fingers briefly. The motion is stall, almost hidden, but you recognize it now as a response to strain. Not injury, but the kind of fatigue that builds, gradually reducing precision if left unaddressed. He returns to his task immediately. The adjustment is enough. You find yourself doing the same. A slight shift in your grip, a brief release of tension, then back to the rhythm. Some historians have examined whether the high pace and repetitive nature of factory work increased the likelihood of accidents over time, particularly as fatigue set in. Others suggest that familiarity with tasks could reduce risk, creating a balance between experience and exhaustion. You feel both sides of that idea. Your movements are becoming more confident, more precise, but your body is also beginning to tire, even if only slightly. It is a quiet tension, one that requires attention. A sound changes near, not dramatically, but enough to catch your awareness. You glance in that direction, your hands continuing their work even as your eyes shift. A worker adjusts his position, correcting something you cannot fully see. The rhythm stabilizes again. You return your gaze forward. The pattern repeats, listening, watching, responding. A reflective point raised by researchers is whether workers viewed these risks as an accepted part of their daily lives or as something to be resisted and improved. The answer varies, shaped by circumstance, opportunity, and personal perspective. You consider that as you continue. There is no clear separation between safety and work here. They exist together. Each action carries both function and potential consequence. A brief pause occurs in your own movement. Not a full stop, just a slight hesitation as you sense something out of place. You adjust quickly, correcting your position before the issue becomes visible. The motion feels natural now, guided by awareness rather than You notice how your breathing has changed, slightly more controlled, more deliberate, not from fear but from focus, a way of maintaining steadiness within the constant motion around you. The machines continue, unchanging in their rhythm, indifferent to the small variations in human movement that surround them. You move with them, carefully, consistently, each motion considered, even if only for a fraction of a second. Across the room, the light has shifted again. Morning has fully taken hold outside, though it feels distant here, filtered through dust and glass. The brightness touches the edges of the space but does not fully reach its center. You remain within that center, where sound, motion, and awareness converge. And within it, you carry the quiet understanding that every action matters, not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, ongoing sense that builds with each passing moment. You continue your work, the rhythm holds, and the awareness of wrist settles into place not as something overwhelming, but as something constant, a presence that moves with you, guiding your hands, shaping your attention, carrying you forward as the day continues, one careful motion at a time. You begin to feel another kind of pressure now, not from the machines, not from the rhythm, but from your own body. A quiet signal that builds slowly, asking for attention in a way that cannot be ignored forever. Discomfort. It is not dramatic, it does not interrupt your work immediately, but it settles in persistent and patient. A well-documented aspect of factory life in the late 19th century is that facilities for basic needs were often limited, poorly maintained, or difficult to access without permission. Workers could not simply step away whenever they wished. Movement itself was part of the system of control. You shift your weight slightly. It helps, but only for a moment. Your awareness divide is again part of you focused on your task. Another part quietly measuring time in a different way now. Not by the clock, not by the cycles of work, but by the growing need for a brief absence. You glance toward the edge of the room. There is a door there, partially visible, used occasionally by workers who step away and return quickly. The movement is rare enough to stand out. Each departure is noted, even if no one says anything. A lesser-known detail from personal accounts is that workers often had to request permission to leave their station, sometimes raising a hand or signalling a supervisor. The response could vary depending on the workplace and the demands of the moment. You consider that now. When is the right moment? Is there one? Your hands continue their motion. The rhythm holds, but the awareness does not fade. Nearby, a worker leans slightly towards another, speaking a few quiet words. There is a brief exchange, then one of them steps away, moving quickly but without panic. Their absence creates a small gap. It's filled almost immediately by the flow of work continuing around it. You watch as they pass through the door, then you return your attention forward. The moment lingers. A curious observation found in some recollections is that even short breaks carried a sense of exposure, not just physically but socially. Stepping away meant being seen, being noted, even if no direct consequence followed. You feel that now. The idea of leaving your station is not simple. It carries weight. It carries weight. You adjust your stance again, trying to manage the discomfort without breaking your rhythm. It works for a time, your body adapting, finding small ways to cope. But the signal remains. Steady, persistent. A worker returns through the door. Their movements are quick, efficient, as if minimizing the time spent away. They slip back into their station with practiced ease, the rhythm resuming without visible disruption. The system absorbs both absence and return. It does not pause. Some historians have explored how limited access to sanitation and rest facilities affected workers' dignity and daily experience, suggesting that these small constraints could shape how the individuals understood their own autonomy within industrial life. You feel the truth of that now. It's not just about physical need. It is about permission. You glance once more toward the door. The timing feels uncertain, but the need has grown clearer. You raise your hand slightly. Not high, not obvious, just enough to be noticed by someone watching. It takes a moment. Then the foreman's gaze passes over you. There is a brief pause, a nod. Small, efficient. Permission granted. You step away. The movement feels both simple and significant. Your body shifts out of the fixed rhythm, your feet carrying you across the floor with a different pace now. The noise remains, but it feels slightly altered when you are not directly within the line of work. You reach the door. It opens with a soft resistance, then closes behind you. The space beyond is quieter, not silent but reduced. The constant roar of machinery softens into a distant presence. The air feels different here, cooler, less saturated with dust. You take a breath. It feels easier. The contrast is immediate. Facilities are base, plain, functional. There is little comfort, little privacy, but enough to serve their purpose. You move quickly, aware of time, even here, aware that your absence is measured. A reflective question raised by some researchers is whether these brief moments away from the factory floor provided any sense of relief beyond the physical, or if the awareness of time and observation followed workers even into these spaces. You sense that awareness now. It does not disappear. Even here, you're conscious of returning. You finish quickly, aye! Wash your hands as best you can. The water is cool, simple grounding in its own way. It clears some of the dust, some of the residue, but not all. The marks of the work remain. You step back towards the door, pause for a brief moment, then open it again. The sound returns immediately, full, unbroken. You step back inside. The warmth, the dust, the rhythm all meet you at once as if you had never left. The transition is quick, almost seamless. You return to your station. Your hands find their place again. The rhythm resumes. There is no announcement, no acknowledge. Only continuation. But something has shifted. Even in that brief absence, you felt a difference. A contrast between spaces, between air, between sound. It lingers with you. Not enough to disrupt your work, but enough to be remembered. You continue. The day moves forward, and within it even the smallest moments of relief carry meaning, quietly shaping how you experience everything around you. You begin to sense a shift long before anything visibly changes. It is not in the machines. They continue as they always do. Not in the air which still carries the same warmth and dust. It is something quieter, carried in glances and posture, and a subtle anticipation that moves through the room. Payday is approaching. A commonly recorded feature of industrial life in the 1880s is that wages were often distributed weekly frequently on Saturdays, marking a moment that workers both relied on and measured their lives around. It was not simply a transaction, but a turning point in the rhythm of the week. You notice the way people check the time more often now. Not constantly, but enough to reveal a change in attention. The clock, which had faded slightly into the background, begins to matter again in a different way. It no longer marks only the passing of labour. It marks the nearing of something else. Relief, perhaps. Or at least the idea of it. Your hands continue their work, but your awareness drifts briefly toward what comes after. You imagine stepping outside the air, changing the sound falling away. And then something in your task shifts and your focus returns. The rhythm does not allow for long distractions. Across the room, a small cluster of workers exchange a few quiet words. You cannot hear them clearly, but you catch fragments. Pay envelope. Short last week. Maybe better this time. The conversation fades as quickly as it appeared. It leaves behind a quiet tension. An often noted detail in historical accounts is that wages could vary due to fines, deductions, or fluctuations in output, leaving workers uncertain about exactly how much they would receive. The moment of payment carried both expectation and risk. You consider that the idea that the work you've been doing hour after hour will soon be translated into a number, a fixed amount. Something tangible, yet not always predictable. A man near you adjusts his posture, stretching slightly before returning to his task. His movements carry a different energy now. Still focused, still controlled, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. You feel it in yourself as well. Not excitement exactly, something steadier. A quiet counting forward. A curious detail mentioned in some recollections is that workers sometimes gathered near pay stations in informal lines, each person waiting with a mix of patience and unease. The act of receiving wages was both routine and deeply personal. You imagine that. You get that moment. Standing, waiting, watching others step forward one by one. Each envelope passed from hand to hand. Each reaction slightly different. Some satisfied, some disappointed, most somewhere in between. Your hands continue their motion. The cycles repeat, but your sense of time has shifted again. It feels closer now. More immediate. Across the room a chalkboard is updated. Numbers are erased, replaced, adjusted. The meaning is not fully clear from your position, but the act itself draws attention. It suggests a nearing conclusion, a closing of one measure before another begins. You watch for a moment, then return to your work. A thoughtful question raised by researchers is whether payday brought genuine relief or simply marked the continuation of financial pressure as wages often disappeared quickly into rent, food, and other necessities. You consider that quietly, the idea that this moment so anticipated might pass quickly once it arrives, that the cycle does not end here, it simply turns. A worker nearby speaks softly. "Company stores open late today," he says to no one in particular. The words hang briefly in the air. You recognize the meaning. Many factories were connected to or influenced local stores where workers could purchase goods sometimes on credit. These arrangements could be convenient but also limiting, tying earnings back into the same system that produced them. You imagine stepping into such a place. Shelves lined with basic goods, prices set perhaps not always in your favor. The exchange of wages for necessities happening almost immediately after they are received. The thought settles in. It does not remove the anticipation, but it shapes it. You adjust your grip again, your hands moving with practiced ease now. The rhythm of your work remains steady even as your thoughts shift briefly toward what comes next. A woman down the row glances toward the clock. Her expression is neutral, but her gaze lingers just a fraction longer than before. Then she looks back to her task. The moment passes, but the feeling remains. The day is moving towards something, not an end exactly, but a transition. You notice how the light has changed again. It is softer now, less direct. The brightness of morning has settled into something even more still. It reaches farther into the room, though still filtered by dust and glass. It marks the passage of hours in its own quiet way. You take a slow breath. The air feels familiar now, less intrusive than before. Your body has adapted, at least partially. The rhythm continues. The machines do not slow, but the people within the space carry a growing awareness of what is coming. Pay, a moment of exchange. A brief shift from labor to reward. You continue your work, your hands steady, your attention balanced between the present and the near future. And as the day moves forward, that quiet anticipation remains, shaping your awareness in small, steady ways, guiding your thoughts even as your body continues its practice motion. You notice the change in your body before anything else shifts around you. It is not sudden, it arrives slowly, almost gently, as if your muscles are reminding you that time has passed, whether you counted it or not. A dull heaviness settles into your shoulders. Your legs feel a little less certain, not weak, just tired in a quiet, steady way. Fatigue, it does not stop you, but it stays with you. A well-known aspect of factory labour in the late 19th century is that long shifts often left workers physically drained by the end of the day, especially when combined with repetitive tasks and limited opportunities for rest. The effort was not always dramatic, but it was continuous, and that continuity left its mark. You continue your work. Your hands still move with rhythm, but now there is effort behind each motion. Not strain, not struggle, just a subtle weight that was not there before. You shift your stance again. The floor feels firmer now, less forgiving than it did earlier. Each step, each adjustment carries a little more awareness. Across the room you see others doing the same. A slight roll of the shoulders, a brief stretch of the neck. Small movement, almost invisible but repeated often enough to reveal their purpose. They are managing, adapting, continuing. A lesser-known detail found in personal accounts is that many workers developed small habits to cope with fatigue during long shifts. These could be simple shifting weight from one foot to another, adjusting grip, or taking brief moments to stretch when possible. These actions were rarely formalized, but they became essential. You try one yourself. A slow rotation of your shoulders, a slight loosening of your fingers. It helps. Not enough to remove the fatigue, but enough to ease it slightly. You return to your task. The rhythm holds, though it feels different now, less automatic, more deliberate. Each motion requires just a bit more attention. You notice your breathing. It is steady but deeper now. Your body drawing in more air, responding to the sustained effort without needing conscious instruction. The machines continue their motion unchanged. They do not tire. They do not slow. They simply continue. A worker nearby exhales more noticeably than before. It is not loud, but it carries a sense of release. A moment where the body acknowledges its own effort. Then the rhythm resumes. Some historians have explored how prolonged physical labour affected workers over time. not just in terms of immediate fatigue, but in the gradual accumulation of wear on the body. The effects were often subtle at first, becoming more apparent only after long periods. You consider that as you continue. This is just one day, but for many it is one of many, repeated, again and again. Across the room, a man leans slightly against his station for a brief moment, not resting fully, just shifting enough to relieve pressure. Then he straightens, returning to his task without hesitation. The movement is quick, almost hidden, but it speaks clearly. A curious observation noted in some recollections is that workers often measured the progress of the day, not by the clock, but by the feeling in their bodies. The gradual build of fatigue acted as its own kind of timekeeping, marking the hours in a physical way. You feel that now. The day is not just passing, it is settling into you. Your arms, your legs, your back, each one carrying a record of the work you have done. You glance toward the windows. The light has softened further, taking on a warmer tone. It suggests the approach of afternoon, though the exact time remains less important than the feeling it brings. The end of the shift is closer, not immediate, but nearer than before. A reflective question raised by researchers is whether workers found ways to mentally distance themselves from fatigue, focusing on the rhythm of the work rather than the strain it caused, or if the physical experience remained constantly present. You test that without meaning to. For a moment, your focus narrows completely to your task. The movement of your hands, the alignment of materials, the timing of each action. The fatigue fades slightly. Not gone, but less central. Then your attention shifts again and it returns. It is always there. You adjust your grip. Your fingers feel slightly stiff now, less responsive than they were earlier. You flex them briefly, restoring some ease, then continue. Across the room, a quiet exchange occurs. A worker murmurs something to another, and a small smile appears in response. It is brief, almost fragile, but it carries a sense of shared experience. They understand, without needing to say much. You feel that connection even if you are not part of the exchange. The shared effort, the shared fatigue, the shared continuation. You return your gaze forward. Your hands move again. The rhythm holds, though it feels heavier now. More grounded. The machines continue without change. The air remains thick with warmth and dust, and within it all your body carries the quiet accumulation of the day's work. You continue, not because it is easy, but because it is expected, because it is part of the flow that began before you arrived and will continue after you leave. The fatigue does not stop you. It simply accompanies you, step by step, motion by motion, as the day moves forward, drawing slowly towards its later hours, carrying you with it in a steady, unbroken rhythm. You begin to sense the world beyond the factory again, not by stepping outside, but through small hints that slip in quietly. A faint draft near the edge of the room, a change in the quality of light, a distant sound that does not belong to the machinery. It reminds you that the factory is not the whole world, even if it has felt that way for hours. A commonly observed feature of industrial cities in the late 19th century is that entire neighbourhoods grew around factories, forming dense districts where work, housing and daily life were closely connected. The factory did not stand alone. It shaped everything around it. You imagine stepping outside at the end of the shift. The street would not be empty. It would be filled with movement, people leaving similar buildings, carrying the same dust, the same fatigue, the same quiet urgency to return somewhere else, home, or something close to it. Your hands continue their work steady despite the growing weight in your body. The rhythm has not changed, but your awareness has expanded again, reaching beyond the walls. Across the room, a worker mentions something under their breath. Boarding house was full last night, they say softly. Another replies with a brief nod. No further explanation is needed. You understand enough. A lesser-known detail from historical accounts is that many factory workers lived in crowded boarding houses or shared accommodations, especially in rapidly growing industrial areas. Space was a limited privacy, even more so, and daily life extended into these close quarters after long hours of labour. You picture it. A narrow room, beds placed close together, voices carrying through thin walls. The day's work not fully left behind, but brought with you in the form of tired bodies and lingering sounds. You shift your stance again, your feet adjusting to the steady pressure of the floor. The thought of leaving becomes more vivid now, not immediate, but present. Across the workshop, a door opens briefly. A worker returns from outside, and with them comes a small change in the air. Cooler, fresher, carrying a hint of something different. Perhaps smoke from a nearby street, perhaps the faint scent of food from somewhere beyond the factory walls. It fades quickly, but not before you notice it. A curious observation found in some personal recollections is that workers often became highly sensitive to the outside air after long hours indoors, even brief exposure feeling noticeably different. It created a contrast that was both refreshing and fleeting. You feel that contrast now even without stepping outside. It lingers in your awareness. Some historians have explored how the growth of factory districts reshaped social life, bringing people from different backgrounds into close proximity while also reinforcing divisions based on work income and origin. These communities were complex, shaped by both connection and constraint. You consider that quietly. The people around you are not just workers, they are neighbours, strangers, familiar faces, each carrying their own version of the same day. You glance toward a group at the far end of the room. They work in relative silence, but there is a subtle coordination between them, a shared understanding that extends beyond the immediate task. It suggests familiarity, perhaps even friendship built over repeated days and shared experience. The factory creates these connections, even as it limits them. You return your attention to your station. The rhythm continues. Your hands move with practiced ease, though the fatigue remains. It has settled into a steady presence, now no longer growing sharply, but not fading either. You notice the light again. It has shifted further, softening at the edges, taking on a tone that suggests the later part of the day. It reaches deeper into the room, now illuminating details that were hidden earlier. Dust in the air, worn surfaces, the subtle expressions on faces. Everything feels slightly more visible. A reflective question raised by researchers is whether workers found a sense of belonging within these industrial communities, or if the demands of labour limited their ability to form deeper social connections. The answer seems to vary, shaped by individual experience. You feel both possibilities at once: the closeness of shared space, the distance created by constant work. A worker nearby hums quietly. The sound is soft, barely audible beneath the machinery, but it carries a sense of something personal, a small fragment of life that exists alongside the demands of the factory. It does not last long, but it remains in your awareness. You continue your work, the rhythm holds, the machines move, and beyond the walls the wider world waits, shaped by the same forces that fill this room. You imagine the streets again, the rows of buildings, the movement of people at the end of the shift, the gradual release of sound as the day's labour concludes. It feels distant, but also near. You take a slow breath. The air inside remains thick, familiar, marked by the hours you have spent within it. Yet somewhere beyond there is something different, something quieter, something that does not move in the same relentless rhythm. You continue, your hands steady, your awareness stretching between here and there, and as the day moves forward, that sense of connection to the outside world grows stronger. Not enough to pull you away, but enough to remind you that this place, for all its presence, is only one part of a larger living environment, one that you will return to soon. When the time comes, you begin to notice the differences in voices, not in volume, because everything is softened by the constant noise, but in tone, in rhythm, in the subtle shapes of words that slip through when the people speak to one another. It is not one uniform way of speaking. It is many layered together, blending into the same working space. Accents, languages, fragments of places far from here. A frequently noted reality of industrial expansion in the late 19th century is that factories and growing cities often relied heavily on immigrant labour. People arrive from different countries, bringing their skills, habits and languages into workplaces that required them to adapt quickly. You hear it in brief exchanges, a word spoken with a different cadence, a phrase that carries unfamiliar sounds. Sometimes two workers speak in a language you do not recognize, their conversation quick and fluid, existing alongside the steady motion of their hands. It does not disrupt the work, it exists within it. You watch a man gesture lightly as he speaks, his hands moving in small, precise motions that mirror his task. The person beside him responds with a nod, understanding clear, even without shared words. Communication finds a way. An overlooked detail in many historical accounts is how workers developed hybrid forms of communication in these environments, mixing languages, gestures, and simplified phrases to bridge gaps. It was not formal, not structured, but effective enough to keep the work moving. You begin to recognize patterns, certain words repeated often, short instructions that carry across language barriers, a glance paired with a gesture that completes the meaning. It feels like another layer of the factory's rhythm, not mechanical, but human. Across the room, a woman adjusts her scarf slightly, revealing a small detail beneath it. A piece of jewellery, simple but distinct, it catches the light briefly before being covered again. It stands out, not because it is elaborate, but because it carries something personal, a reminder of somewhere else. A curious detail sometimes mentioned in personal recollections is that workers often held on to small items from home objects that connected them to their past or their identity. These items were rarely displayed openly, but they were kept close, quietly meaningful. You imagine what that might feel like, to carry a piece of your origin into a place that reshapes your daily life so completely, to hold on to something that remains unchanged. You return your attention to your task. Your hands move steadily, your body now fully engaged in the rhythm of the day. The fatigue remains, but it has settled into a consistent presence, no longer surprising, simply there. A man nearby speaks again, this time more clearly. "Long day," he says. The words are simple, universal. The person beside him smiles faintly, a brief acknowledgement that needs no further explanation. You understand it too. A thoughtful question raised by historians is whether the shared experience of industrial labour created a sense of unity among workers from different backgrounds, or if divisions based on language, culture and origin remained strong within these spaces. You sense both possibilities around you, moments of connection, moments of distance. They exist side by side, shaped by circumstance and necessity. You notice how some workers group themselves loosely, not formally, not in fixed arrangements, but through familiarity. People who share a language, a background, or simply a history of working together. It creates small pockets within the larger space, communities within the system. You adjust your stance again. Your feet respond automatically now, finding positions that ease the pressure without interrupting your work. Your body has learned more than you expected, adapting to the demands placed upon it. The machines continue. The sound remains constant, and within it these human variations persist, subtle, enduring. A worker at the far end of the row hums again, this time with a melody that feels unfamiliar. It carries a different rhythm, a different structure, something that hints at a place beyond this factory. It lasts only a few seconds. Then it fades, but it leaves an impression. You realize how much this environment is shaped not just by the machines, but by the people within it. Their habits, their voices, their small expressions of identity that persist despite the uniform demands of the work. You continue your task. The rhythm holds. Your awareness moves between the mechanical and the human, recognizing how they coexist, how they shape each other. A reflective consideration often discussed by scholars is whether the factory served as a place of cultural blending where differences softened over time, or as a place where those differences remained clearly defined. You do not have a clear answer, but you feel the question in the space around you, in the voices, in the gestures, in the quiet presence of many different lives moving together within the same structured environment. You take a slow breath. The air is familiar now, marked by hours of work, and within it you sense something steady, not uniformity, but coexistence. You continue, your hands moving with practiced precision, your awareness expanding just enough to take in the layers of human experience that exist alongside the relentless motion of the machines. And as the day moves forward, those layers remain subtle but persistent, shaping the atmosphere in ways that are not always visible but always present. You begin to notice something softer moving beneath the weight of the day. Not a change in the work itself, the machines continue, the rhythm holds, the air remains the same, but within that structure, small moments begin to appear almost hidden, easy to miss if you're not looking for them. Lightness. It arrives quietly. A well-observed aspect of factory life is that workers often found subtle ways to cope with long hours and strict conditions, using humour, brief conversation, or small shared gestures to ease the strain. These moments were not planned. They emerged naturally, shaped by proximity and repetition. You catch it first in a glance. A man looks up from his task just long enough to meet the eyes of someone across the aisle. There is no spoken word, just a quick lift of the eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head. The other responds with the faintest hint of a smile. Then both return to their work. The exchange lasts less than a second, but it leaves something behind. You feel it. A small shift in the atmosphere. Nearby, someone murmurs a short remark barely audible beneath the machines. You cannot make out the exact words, but the tone carries a gentle humour. A few workers close enough to hear react with subtle changes in expression. A soft breath that might be a laugh. A brief brightening of the eyes. The sound does not rise above the noise, but it exists within it. An understated detail found in some worker accounts is that humour in factories often had to be quiet and brief, shaped by the need to avoid drawing attention. Jokes were short, sometimes only a phrase or a shared reference understood quickly and then set aside. You notice how it fits into the rhythm. It does not interrupt. It flows between motions, between breaths, between the steady cycles of work. You feel your own expression shift slightly. Not a full smile, but something something close. A response that mirrors what you are observing. Across the row, a woman adjusts a piece of material, then pauses for just a fraction longer than necessary. She glances towards the person beside her and makes a small gesture with her hand, something playful, almost like a quiet imitation of the machine's movement. The other woman notices. Her shoulders lift slightly, a contained reaction, then settle again as she returns to her task. The moment passes, but it leaves a trace of warmth. Some historians have suggested that these small interactions helped workers maintain a sense of individuality and connection within environments that were otherwise highly structured and repetitive. Others argue that such moments, while meaningful, did little to change the broader conditions of labour. You consider that as you continue, the effect may be small, but it is not nothing. A curious observation recorded in a few recollections is that workers sometimes gave nicknames to machines or created informal stories about them, treating them almost as characters within the workplace. It was a way of making the environment feel more familiar, less mechanical. You listen for signs of that. A word repeated with a certain tone, a reference that seems to carry shared meaning. It is subtle, but you begin to sense it. The machines are not just objects. They are part of the daily language of the space. You adjust your stance again. Your body responds more naturally now, the fatigue still present but balanced by familiarity. Your hands move with steady confidence, guided by the rhythm that has settled into you. Another brief exchange occurs nearly. "Careful, she's faster than you," someone says, the words delivered lightly. The response is a quick shake of the head, followed by a slight increase in pace that carries a hint of playful challenge. It does not disrupt the work, it becomes part of it. A reflective question often explored by researchers is whether these moments of humour and interaction provided genuine relief or simply helped sustain the ability to continue working under demanding conditions. The answer may lie somewhere in between. You feel that balance. The work remains. The structure does not change, but within it these small moments create space, not large enough to alter the day, but enough to soften it. You notice how your attention shifts during these moments. For a brief instant, the weight of the environment feels lighter. The noise recedes slightly. The repetition feels less rigid. Then the rhythm returns. The structure reasserts itself, and you continue. Across the room, someone taps lightly against a surface in a pattern that almost resembles a rhythm separate from the machines. It lasts only a few seconds, then stops. But it stands out. A small act of expression within a controlled space. You wonder how many of these moments pass unnoticed each day. How many small gestures, quiet jokes, brief connections exist beneath the surface of the work. They're easy to overlook, but once seen, they become part of the experience. You return your focus fully to your task. Your hands move. The machines continue. The air remains unchanged, and within it all, these quiet threads of human connection weave through the structure, subtle but persistent. They do not stop the day, they do not slow the work, but they remind you of something essential. That even here within the steady demands of the factory, people find ways to express themselves, to connect, to create moments that belong to them. You continue. The rhythm holds, and those small moments stay with you quietly, shaping the atmosphere as the day moves forward. You begin to notice a different kind of tension moving through the space. It's not tied to the machines or the pace of work. It does not rise and fall with the rhythm you have learned. Instead, it exists just beneath the surface, carried in certain glances and conversations that stop when someone passes too close. It feels quieter, but heavier. A well-recorded development in the late 19th century is the gradual rise of organised labour movements, where workers began to gather, discuss conditions, and consider collective action such as strikes or unions. These efforts were not always visible inside the factory, but their presence could still be felt. You catch fragments of it in passing. Two workers lean slightly toward each other, their voices low enough to disappear beneath the machines. You hear only a few words. Meeting tonight, careful who you tell, then silence. They return to their tasks without looking at each other again. The exchange is brief, but it lingers. An often overlooked detail is that many early labour discussions happened informally outside official structures, sometimes in boarding houses, taverns, or quiet corners away from supervision. These conversations carried risk, and so they were kept small and discreet. You sense that caution now. It shapes the way people speak, the way they pause, the way they choose when not to speak at all. Your hands continue their work. The rhythm remains steady, but your awareness has shifted, again widening to include this quieter layer of activity. Across the room, a man glances toward the foreman before speaking to the person beside him. The look is quick practiced. A check. Then a few words pass between them, too soft to hear. The foreman continues on, unaware or choosing not to notice. The moment passes, but the pattern becomes clearer. These conversations exist, carefully. A curious observation found in some personal recollections is that workers sometimes develop coded language or indirect ways of referring to meetings or plans, allowing them to communicate without drawing attention. These methods were subtle and constantly changing. You listen for signs of that. A phrase that seems ordinary but carries a different meaning, a tone that suggests more than the words themselves. It is difficult to be certain, but you feel it, something beneath the surface. Some historians have explored whether these early efforts at organisation were driven more by immediate needs such as wages and hours, or by a broader sense of fairness and rights. The motivations varied, shaped by individual experience and the conditions of each workplace. You consider that as you continue. The fatigue in your body, the structure of the day, the small moments of strain and control you have already felt. It becomes easier to understand why such conversations might begin. A worker near you adjusts their stance and speaks softly. Long hours again this week, they say. The person beside them nods. No further comment. But the meaning is clear. Shared experience. Shared awareness. Across the room, another brief exchange occurs. A hand gesture. A slight tilt of the head toward the door. A moment of eye contact. Then nothing. The work continues. A reflective question often raised by researchers is whether the risk of speaking out outweighed the potential benefits of collective action for many workers, especially in environments where jobs were uncertain and consequences could be severe. You feel that balance now. The weight of possibility, the weight of caution, both present at the same time. Your hands move steadily. Your body remains within the rhythm, but your thoughts expand considering the layers of experience that exist within this space. The visible and the hidden. A man at the far end of the row pauses briefly, then resumes his task with slightly more force, as if channeling something into his work. The motion is controlled, but it carries a hint of intensity. It fades quickly, but it leaves an impression, a sense that not all responses are spoken. Some are carried in action. A detail sometimes mentioned in historical discussions is that not all workers supported or trusted early organising efforts. Differences in opinion, background, and personal circumstance could create divisions even among those who shared the same working conditions. You sense that complexity here. Not a single onjadis and not a single unified feeling, but many, interwoven. You continue your task. The rhythm holds. The machines move. And beneath it all, these quiet currents of thought and conversation continue to flow, shaping the atmosphere in ways that are not immediately visible but deeply present. You glance once more across the room. The same patterns repeat. Brief exchanges, careful glances, moments of silence where something more might have been said. Then the work resumes fully, uninterrupted. You return your gaze forward. Your hands move with steady precision, and within the structured flow of the factory, the possibility of change exists not loudly, not clearly, but in small, careful steps that begin with quiet conversation like these. The day continues, and with it the sense that something beyond the immediate work is slowly taking shape, even if it remains just out of reach, just beyond what can be openly seen. You begin to sense a different kind of attention pressing in from beyond the factory walls, not from the workers, not from the foreman, but from something wider, something that does not stand beside you yet still seems to shape what happens here. It shows itself in small ways, a notice posted where people can see it, a remark passed from one worker to another, a name mentioned quietly then left hanging in the air. Reform, a frequently noted development toward the end of the 19th century, is that public concern about factory conditions began to grow, leading to early labour laws, inspections and debates about how industrial work should be regulated. These efforts did not transform conditions overnight, but they mark the beginning of a wider conversation. You notice a paper fixed near a support beam. The writing is dense, formal, not easy to read from where you stand, but it is different from the usual rules and fines. It speaks of something beyond immediate discipline, something that reaches outward. You cannot make out all the words, but you understand enough to feel the shift. Someone is watching, not in the same way as the foreman, in a different way, more distant, more uncertain. An often overlooked of my tale is that early factory inspections where they existed were inconsistent and sometimes influenced by local conditions or political pressure. The idea of oversight from outside the factory was still developing and its impact varied widely. You consider that as you continue your work. The rhythm remains unchanged. The machines do not slow, but the awareness of something beyond the walls lingers. A worker nearby speaks softly. "Heard they came last month," he says. The person beside him nods. "Didn't change much." The exchange ends there. No elaboration. But the meaning carries through. Expectation, disappointment, acceptance. A curious detail mentioned in some accounts is that certain factory owners adopted a form of paternal oversight, presenting themselves as protectors or providers for their workers. This could include housing stores or basic services, but it also reinforced control and dependence. You think about the company store mentioned earlier, the boarding houses, the systems that extend beyond the factory floor. It forms a larger structure, one that shapes daily life in ways that are not always visible during the shift itself. Across the room, the foreman pauses near the posted notice. He glances at it briefly, then continues on, his expression unchanged. The moment is small, but it suggests awareness. Even here within the controlled environment of the factory, the outside world leaves its mark. Some historians have examined whether early reforms were driven more by genuine concern for workers or by a desire to maintain order and productivity within growing industrial systems. The motivations were often mixed, shaped by economic, social and political pressures. You feel that complexity now. Nothing is simple. Not the work, not the system, not the attempts to change it. You adjust your stance again. Your body continues to respond to the steady demands of the day, your movements now fully integrated into the rhythm that surrounds you. The fatigue remains, but it has become familiar. A constant presence that no longer surprises. Across the room, a man speaks again, his voice low. "Maybe things will shift," he says. There is no immediate response, just a brief pause. Then the work continues. The words linger, unanswered. A reflective question raised by researchers is whether workers believed in the possibility of meaningful change, or if such ideas felt distant, uncertain, shaped more by hope than by expectation. You consider that quietly. The idea of change exists, but it feels far away, not part of this moment, not part of this hour, yet still present, a small thread running through the larger fabric of the day. You glance once more toward the notice. The words remain difficult to read, but their presence alone carries weight, a sign that the factory is not entirely closed off, that it exists within a broader system, one that is beginning slowly to take notice. You return your focus to your task. Your hands move with steady precision. The machines continue their endless motion, and within that continuity, the awareness of something beyond the immediate work remains subtle but persistent. You continue. The rhythm holds. The day moves forward. And somewhere beyond these walls, conversations unfold, decisions are considered, and small steps toward change begin to take shape, even if their impact has not yet fully reached the place where you stand. You begin to feel the end of the day before it is officially declared. It shows itself in small ways. The light has softened, taking on a warmer tone that reaches deeper into the room. The edges of shadows stretch longer across the floor. The air feels slightly cooler, or perhaps your body simply notices the change more clearly now. The rhythm continues, but something beneath it has shifted. An established pattern of factory life in this period is that the end of the shift was often marked by the same bells or whistles that began it, creating a clear boundary between labour and release. Until that signal arrives, the work does not slow. You continue. Your hands move with steady familiarity, completing each motion with the confidence that has built over the course of the day. The fatigue remains, but it has settled into a quiet, constant presence. Across the room, others maintain their pace. There is no visible rush toward the end, no sudden change, only continuing. A subtle detail noted in worker recollections is that the final stretch of the day often felt both shorter and longer at the same time. Shorter because the end was near, longer because the body had already carried so much. You feel that now. Each movement seems slightly more deliberate. Each moment slightly more noticeable. You glance toward the clock. The hands have moved again. Closer, not yet there, but approaching. A worker nearby exhales slowly, the sound almost lost within the noise. It carries a sense of quiet endurance, a recognition of what has already been completed. You continue your task. The machines move. The air remains thick with the traces of the day, and within it all, the sense of nearing completion grows. A reflective question often considered by historians is whether the end of the workday brought a true sense of relief or simply marked the transition into another set of responsibilities outside the factory. For many, the answer was not simple. You consider that as you continue. The idea of leaving, the idea of stepping outside, of breathing different air. It feels close now, but not complete. Across the room, a worker glances toward the door. The movement is brief, but it carries meaning. Others follow with similar glances, small, almost instinctive checks that do not interrupt the rhythm of their work. The awareness spreads quietly. The day is ending. A curious observation found in some accounts is that the sound of the final bell could feel almost physical, not just heard, but felt as if it carried the weight of release within it. You imagine that moment, the sudden shift, the break in continuity. You continue your task. One more cycle, then another. The pattern repeats, steady, familiar. The light shifts again, growing softer, more diffuse. The room feels different now, not in its structure, but in its atmosphere. A quiet anticipation has taken hold, subtle but unmistakable. You take a slow breath. The air is the same, but your awareness of it has changed. You are ready to leave it behind. At least for now, the sound comes, clear, sharp. The bell. It cuts through everything, just as it did at the beginning of the day, but this time it carries a different meaning. Release. The machines do not stop instantly. They wind down in stages, their motion still slowing, their sounds shifting from constant to intermittent. The room changes gradually, the noise breaking apart into smaller fragments. Workers begin to move differently, not faster, but with purpose. Hands finish the motions they have already begun. Materials are set into place, tools are adjusted, secured, left, ready for the next day. There is no chaos, only transition. You complete your final movement. Then your hands come to rest. For the first time in hours, the stillness feels unfamiliar, but welcome. Around you, others step away from their stations. The space begins to open, the tight structure loosening as people move toward the exit. The air shifts with them, carrying the accumulated warmth and dust toward the doors. You join them. Your steps feel different now, lighter despite the fatigue, freer despite the weight you carry. You move toward the door, the same one you entered through, though. It feels changed now, shaped by everything that has happened within. It opens. The outside air meets you. Cooler, cleaner. It fills your lungs in a way that feels almost surprising. You take a deeper breath, then another. The contrast is clear. Behind you, the factory continues its slow settling, the sounds fading but not disappearing entirely. Ahead of you, the street waits. People move in the same direction, carrying the day with them in quiet ways. Dust on clothing, fatigue in posture, shared experience in silence. You step forward, away from the machines, away from the rhythm that has shaped your entire day, but not entirely free of it. A thoughtful consideration raised by scholars is whether workers ever truly left the factory behind at the end of the day, or if its patterns remained within them, influencing how they moved, thought, and felt long after they stepped outside. You sense that now. The rhythm still echoes faintly in your movements. The ocean. Awareness remains. Even as you walk away, the light continues to fade. The day transitions into evening, and within that shift you carry the quiet understanding of what it has been like to exist inside that world, not as an observer, but as a part of it. For a time, you continue walking. The sounds behind you grow softer, the air grows clearer, and the steady pace of your steps replaces the rhythm of the machines. You are outside, but the memory of the day remains, settling gently. Fading slowly, becoming something you can leave behind. Piece by piece, the pace of your thoughts begins to slow now. The sharp edges of the day soften, becoming less defined, less immediate. The sounds that once filled your awareness fade into the background, replaced by a quieter rhythm. You walk, your step steady, unhurried. The air feels cool against your shin, carrying none of the weight you've grown used to. Each breath comes easier, deeper, as if your body is remembering something it had nearly forgotten. There is no urgency now, no need to match the pace of machines or the measure of a clock. Only the gentle continuation of a movement. You notice the sky, the way it shifts from light to something softer, something calmer. Colours blend slowly, fading into one another without effort. It feels distant from the factory, almost separate. Your body begins to release the tension it has held throughout the day. Your shoulders lower slightly. Your hands relax, no longer guided by repetition. Even the thoughts of work begin to drift, and they do not disappear all at once, but they lose their weight, becoming quieter, lighter. You continue walking. The street stretches ahead, calm and open. There is space here, room to breathe, room to exist without constant motion. And as you move forward, the memory of the day settles gently behind you, no longer pressing, no longer demanding. Just there, fading. You take one more slow breath, then another, and allow yourself to rest in that quiet space where the rhythm has softened, where the noise has faded, where the day has come to a gentle close. Sweet dreams.